Hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Better the Pond Pondcast, the Flying V edition, where we talk to incredible people who are creating impact and ripples on the pond. My name is Warren Berry, and I'm your host and the founder of Instinctive Solutions, where we believe that everyone is an odd duck, but that is what makes them awesome. Today, my guests are Chris Knight of Monteyne Architecture and James Melendez of Bobcat Construction. These two companies do business together in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Now, these two fine gentlemen and their companies work together to create high performance, world-class construction and create healthy spaces and healthy environments for people to live and to work. Eavesdrop in our conversation about their stories and their backstories. What I listened to was about two remarkable stories about two completely separate families that immigrated to Canada, created a quality life for their families. What really made me pay attention was how Chris and James are still doing the same thing for families, building quality buildings for people to have a quality life for their families. As Chris said, a place for mental ease to dwell within. These two gentlemen build a better pond for people to live. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Knight and James Melendez. James Melendez, I think one of the best looking guys in all of Winnipeg, Manitoba, from Bobsled Construction, and Chris Knight from Monteyne. Is it Monteyne? Is that
Monteyne? Monteyne, pretty close. Yeah.
Monteyne Architecture, also from Winnipeg. I met you two fine gentlemen. We'll give Joanne Sigurdsson a bit of a shout out here from Tech Canada and at the Emerging Leaders Program. And because of your absolute genius contribution and everything you're doing to better the pond, you were well chosen and definitely successful in being a guest on the Better the Pond podcast. Gentlemen, it is fantastic to have you.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Warren.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. Looking forward to it.
James, still the best looking guy in all of Winnipeg. So
I agree.
I love it. All right. So let's, I know that you two worked together when we met the tech meeting. And so do you want to sort of give me a little bit of insight? Maybe James, we'll start with you about bobsled construction. And then Chris, you can talk about Monteyne and tell my audience what is it that you guys do?
Yeah.
Well,
So
why don't I start, because it's kind of started with Monteyne, and then it'll make a little bit more sense.
yeah, I agree.
For James to sort of explain the back half. So what we are is a pair of companies. So it's Monteyne Architecture, Bobsled Construction, and it's a strategically linked pair of companies that do architect-led design build. Monteyne, we're in our 30th year. I've been here for about 16 years, with a gap between my undergrad and my master's. And for the last 12 years, we have had a sister company that we started doing construction projects. Very modest, doing little renovations, basements, little additions. And over the last 14 years, the construction company has been outpacing the growth of the Monteyne side, such that when we started, Bobsled was executing maybe 10% of our work, and now it's executing about 80% of our work.
Wow.
So it's a rather significant execution arm of our architectural practice, and it's a quite a unique proposition, as far as I can tell. There's very few other people that are doing this. So anyway, so the architecture side started off as a bespoke, very design intensive, service and design oriented firm. So we're not a production type firm. We focus very heavily on urbanism. We do very little greenfield sites, usually adaptive reuse projects. So an old warehouse converted into housing, for example. We do a fair bit of mixed use projects. So, in urban spaces, often you'll have a commercial ground floor with residential stories above. Those kinds of projects. We heavily emphasize stewardship is sort of a core sort of value to our firm. Environmental stewardship, appropriate use of materials, appropriate use of time, space. So efficiency can be understood in a whole variety of different ways, including how a building performs. So we really value those things. And then we like to think that the projects that we execute are greater than the sum of its parts. It isn't just a list of boxes that you check and then you end up with great design. It's usually the synthesis of all of these things that make for really great design. And the key element to the synthesis of this is having control over how the project is constructed, how it's executed, how it's budgeted, how it's planned. And that is really where James is starting to take what started off as a really great idea, and we were able to take it a certain distance on our own. But since he's joined us, we've really been able to leverage and capitalize on his experience to take those original intentions and really make them sing.
Before we jump into you, James, that's great. That's fantastic. I'm interested, Chris, in when you talked about sort of the sort of the green aspect or reutilization of what's already there. So as an example, you said take an old warehouse and put it into housing. Why is it so important to you? Why is it so important to Monteyne that you actually have embarked into that world?
Well, architects I'd say this is a generality, but you will find that there are probably a higher proportion of idealists in this vocation than in some others. Part of the vocation demands that you can visualize a world in a way before it even exists. You have to be able to have some insight into a future that you imagine is going to in some way be better than a present. And so this is an outworking of that future, and it makes for healthy spaces, so physically healthy, so indoor air quality being really important. It makes for healthy minds, having beautiful spaces that people can dwell in and inhabit. We're urbanists. Most people on this planet are city dwellers, and they spend more than 90% of their time inside buildings in built form. And if the buildings are not oriented toward edified existence, you're going to have a less than optimal existence.
Interesting. All right, well, let's go. We're going to run with that. So, to be a good steward of time, James, tell us a little about bobsled. Take what was laid down there.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so the genesis of me coming on board is I believe there was a better way of delivering construction. So I had previous experience with an art engineering, integrated engineering design firm that delivered industrial projects. So we did the engineering and we delivered the construction all in house. And I really thought that was quite good, as well as is very difficult to replicate and very, very difficult to do, because all your fighting is internal. Externally, you have to, show the face that, hey, we got it under control. On the construction side, in the Canadian market, but particularly the Winnipeg market, which I have the most experience in, there is a lump sum world where the architects design and you go and bid it, and then it's the race to the bottom, and then the contractor looks at the drawings and say, well, the architect missed this, and the architect says you should have assumed, and it becomes this really litigious environment. And I really, really, seeing what this industrial engineering contract delivery firm did, I was that's pretty cool. I wish it was applied to the commercial world, to the buildings world. And at that point, enter Chris Knight. They were looking for growing the essentially trying to move Chris out of the construction world. He's an architect by profession. That's what he should be doing. But he was really running the operations or running the sites for the construction arm, and really that's where Chris Hart was more on the architecture delivery side as opposed to the construction side. So we're looking for a project manager. I knew one of the business partners over at Monteyne, and long story short, it ended up realizing that I didn't want to be a project manager. I wanted to be a business owner, and they weren't looking for that at the time. And just say, hey, I'll help you out in any way I can. And then through conversations with Chris, really seeing the vision as he had described about, you know, the values of the architecture firm, the way they deliver construction, and I was like, this would be a pretty unique opportunity to join as a company like this, but not as an employee, but as a partner, and it would just happened to be the right time, right place, and we ended up joining kind of together. And when I joined, like Chris had discussed, the projects themselves were lined up, but we weren't. Bobsled was not delivering all of them, and so I saw some opportunity there. And since then, um, just reflecting on the business this morning, actually, uh, I was able to, we've added. So when I started, there was uh, five, six members on the bobsled team, and now we are up to 20 in 2 years, and the total organization is a total of 28 people in total between Monteyne and Bobsled. Our volume increased significantly. Our clients overall are extremely pleased with the way we deliver projects. So we're delivering what we're promising on. So a lot of transition has happened. We've also increased the way we do project management, project accounting. So it's been really a great experience to grow a business in the commercial world, and because it's not a business that's easily broken into, but we were able to leverage the bobsled brand, the Montane architecture connection, and really just grow with that. And now, really are set to enter into the future with a really strong team. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So James, if you mind, I'm really, because this is such an interesting, you put these two worlds that, you made it together. As Chris said, it's now, you guys are doing 10%, now you're doing 80. So you can see the combination of the two really come together, which I don't think I've ever really seen in your industries. It's usually separate. And so what do you think the advantage is to your client slash customer that you two actually work, so collaboratively?
Let Chris wants to take this one on. If not, I can.
A few reasons. The first, James already alluded to. This is the world of architecture and construction are both well-trodden paths. Much of the built environment is procured through standard contract models. Somebody hires a person or an organization, hires an architect assembles a set of plans. They go through all of the normal phases from concept design to design development, to contract documents, and then into tendering. And then at the tendering phase, they put it out to market. And there's a variety of different ways in which you do that. And the market responds. You get either construction managers, builders come in, and then they will submit bids to do the work. And then a contract is established. The schedule is confirmed. The funds are in place from the client, and then you start. And very often at that moment is when the conflict starts. You have basically a project that everybody has done, hopefully a decent job, at least trying to define the extent of that project, but often not. And then you have a fixed number, and everyone is sort of duking it out to try to sort of get to the end of the project with try to eat as much of the pie as possible, but that pie is only so big. So it isn't meant to be an antagonistic or hostile process, but very often it ends up being that way. Or something gets missed, and then you have to do, so, like there's different mechanisms or a change order that you would send back to the client, and the client would say, well, who missed this? So should that not have been captured? So it's a complex process, and this is a way, a well sort of utilized path to be able to get to the finish line. However, there's all kinds of inefficiencies in it. The first is you don't have cost verification during the design process, because with this design bid build model that I just described, the market model, you don't have a means by which you can test your ideas, both in terms of constructability, if or cost certainty. So when the two companies, so when Monteyne and Bobsled are really working well together, we will develop a project internally, take it to a point, and then give it over to Bobsled. Bobsled will analyze it. They will see where the efficiencies are, where the fat in the project is, be able to have a real meaningful conversation about what the project is about, like just to make sure that our priorities are maintained on the architecture side, and where there's stuff that can be either effort or resources or funds be reallocated to offer better value to the client, or to sort of reinforce what the main architectural intention is. We get that call and response through the entire process. So we're not waiting until the end to find out that, well, we blew the budget, we didn't even know it. Or we detailed something that is awkward and it's going to be more expensive because the industry doesn't know how to respond to that. So instead of waiting to the end, we basically work side by side all the way along. And then not only are we convinced internally, we're able to communicate to the client as we go as well. So our budget is in lockstep with our design development, and our material selections are in lockstep with the advancement of the design. So there isn't just this giant surprise at the end. Or, the other way to do it is if you have a client that has just nothing but money and time, you could expect that the document production would, like the architectural drawings, would be so thick and so heavy that you would sort of avoid all of the ambiguity at the end. But then at the cost of the project taking so long to develop that you're not really keeping pace with the normal pace of the modern economy.
Right.
So I don't know, in a nutshell, that kind of is the real nugget of the value that we add by having this internal process by which the two companies are working on the same project at the same time.
It's kind of like there's two points I want to make on that. One is kind of sounds like the typical model is us and them.
Yeah.
Right. It's us and them. And then that becomes the fight. And what's interesting as you're talking about this, I was in medicine for 30 years. And one of the interesting things when I get a patient, I dealt a lot with chronic pain patients. And what I would get is they would come in and they would say, well, my doctor said, and then my chiropractor said, and my physio said, and my exercise therapist said, and my pharmacist said, and this said, and there's the patient in the middle, as confused as the day is long, right? Because everyone's given them different inputs on what their perspective is. And the person who's all about is the most confused. And you got to try to unravel all of that because all the other people never communicated. The doctor never talked to the chiropractor never talked to the physiotherapist never talked to the nutritionist. No one talks, and yet but they give their input, and then you leave the client. The most important piece in the middle is the one that actually is getting kind of the short end of the stick. So I kind of see that what you're trying to accomplish is kind of the same idea, right? Is that if we actually just the two of us communicate, right, in the end, that's the client is the one who wins.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities when you're dealing with complex groups of professionals like that, because usually we have a civil engineer, mechanical engineer, architectural, structural, electrical,
Mhm.
environmental, if a specialist or acoustic. There's all kinds of consultants that or normally the architect is the prime consultant. So we would be sort of the face of the project with the client. But then behind all of that, we have, all of these sub-consultants that come up. And then, as part of that, the builder is one of those key, consultants. And what we really rely on the builder to assist with is to also have this upward consultancy within their chain, do constructability reviews. Like we have access to people that are like seasoned builders, like on tools. So it's not just some abstraction as to whether, the thing by some calculation works. It's like, will it actually work? So
Mm.
so yeah, and that's, I mean, that's really in the end, if you don't have built form that expresses all of these ideals and intentions, then you haven't hit the mark.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah. So I love, just going back to wrap this up is, I love the idea of, instead of us and them, it's us and us. And that's a really, I love that. That's a great model. And how you're working really, really, truly collaborating, right? To get a better result in the end. So well done. All right. Now I'm gonna jump into the personal side here a bit. We'll try to give you a little bit of the condensed form just for time, but
Sure.
I'd like my listeners to know who you are. So this will be the Coles Notes version of your life right here. So I'm going to start with James because Chris, you're having your coffee, you talked a lot, so I'm going to pick on James here a little bit. So James, now
Mhm.
I know that you were born at a very young age.
I
So
was.
yeah. So what got you from a Gosling? Where were you hatched? Where did you start life to leaving the nest to where you're today? What's your backstory, James?
I'll give you the, like you said, Coles Notes version. I was born in El Salvador, San Salvador, El Salvador, back in the 1980s, so a long time ago. During that time, it was Civil War time in Central America, and my parents had to make a tough decision and flee the country.
Mm,
Um, Long story short, my parents had to uh, take a bunch of risks to get to Canada, but eventually landed in Canada. My dad always had a vision of when he left, he was there. The option to stay in the States was we had families in the States and stuff like that, and my dad was very clear and adamant there that Canada was home for our family. So he made a huge step of faith, and there was a man who also took a huge step of faith and sponsored our family with 5 kids. I come from a family of 5, and my parents, and said, I'll sponsor you." And just so for the audience to know, sponsorship for for somebody coming to Canada means that you're financially liable for any social programs that they may go on for 10 years, so it doesn't impact the Canadian
wow.
people. So that was a major risk, not knowing my dad from hole in the wall and 5 kids. The guy took a massive risk. So fast forward, that ended off. We were benefactors of that, and we were very grateful. And it was in 20 20 14 now, I think, or 2019 when we celebrated. It was no, it was 2014, almost 10 years ago. We celebrated our 30th year of being in Canada, and we actually honored our sponsor and just said, "Hey, thanks. This is kind of what you invested in." So that was kind of neat. That was our family. So that's my family background.
Did
Um,
I ask you how old you were when you came from El Salvador?
I was only 4.
4. Okay. Do you
Yeah,
remember it?
I do not.
Oh,
No, no, I do not. I think part of it, if I'm being perfectly honest, is just sheer self defense mechanism. Where I was just
sure.
like, nope, I'm blocking that out. Because yeah, just the reality is, I think you just learn as a kid, just like certain things you just can can kind of block out, and I unfortunately have completely blocked that out of my memory. So I came here, so like my memory really starts in Canada and just
Okay.
remembering being here. So that was good. So that's like I said, that's my heritage side.
Mhm.
My education side, I'm an engineer. Graduated from the University of Manitoba. Graduated from biosystems, and always knew I wanted to be in business. That was my end result, my end goal, my driving passion, and started really wanted to be in project management. So I started off there and never looked back. I gained experience with some larger national firms that I've had really good experience with. But there was always a burning desire of of being a part of a business and seeing something grow and being part of that leadership and really living up. That was my dream and my desire. So that was always burning inside of me. So when I had, once again, like I said, when I met Chris and seeing the team and seeing what we have, I just thought this is a really special opportunity, and it was really frightening at the same time. So it's at the end of the day, I looked at it and then go, well, I have a really uh, I'm part of a larger organization where systems are established. I don't have to go and find the work. I don't have to worry about payroll. I don't have to worry about what's in the bank. There was a whole bunch of stuff. Plus, it was an employee-owned company as well. Uh, Therefore, I had shares and honestly treated very well. I have zero complaints with that. But it just didn't satisfy that that desire, and it was actually my wife who who laid it on the line for me and just said, she said, I'll support you no matter what. But she goes, if if failure wasn't an option, like if it just you wouldn't fail, what would you be doing? And I looked at her and I'm like, I'd be in business. And she's like, well, there you go. So are you going to live your life in fear, or are you going to live in faith? And I was like, well, that's pretty scary, not gonna lie, because there's a huge risk here, but calculated. I know Chris, I know the firm, and like it wasn't complete throwing caution to the wind,
Mhm.
but it was definitely a huge leap of faith. And really grateful for that, really grateful for the team around me. And I really feel, to use your phrase, that we are bettering the pond in construction and the way we deliver projects, as well as bettering the pond for our staff. And one of the things I think we as owners are extremely proud of that happened over the last year was we've also added a matching uh, kind of pension plan where employees put 5%, up to 5%. We will match up to 5%, and just those small things add trajectory setting changes to our team's lives. It's not just about profit's important, but it is far from everything. So
Mm.
we're pretty excited of where the company is going.
Cool. Love it. All right. Chris, you're up. Chris, what is your backstory?
Um, the backstory. My grandparents on my mother's side are Polish, so they actually were interred during the Second World War. So in 1939, that's sort of where the hostilities first happened, and so they were actually captured and put in work camps for the duration of the war.
Wow.
My grandfather taught himself how to darn socks and fix uniforms during that time. And after the war, they met back up. They were from the same village. They immigrated to Canada, and they started a tailor shop. And they ended up being very successful. They had a great life. They had a lovely house in a middle class neighborhood. They bought a cabin in Lake of the Woods that our whole family went to. They wintered in Florida. They bought a condo in Tampa Bay. So they had Canada was a significant, like, to say it was the land of opportunity for them would be, a profound understatement. So that was my mother's side. And I mean, that work ethic has sort of, permeated my whole family. So it's a similar story to James, just, two generations before. You came here with absolutely nothing, with, a good measure of boldness and faith and kindness of others. And on my father's side, my grandmother immigrated from England with her family, when she was quite young. So this is even a generation before, and they were turning sod on the Canadian prairies. They lived in a sod hut for the first 5 years. Off the train, they walked 2 days to find their parcel, and that was their beginning in La Riviere, Manitoba. The farming life did not work out for them. They ended up moving into the city. My grandfather started a grocery delivery business, of all things. So even that's kind of gone full circle. It sort of it wound down in the 90s, and now it's become a thing again. But at its peak, he had close to 40 trucks delivering groceries full time. So it was, it was also a moment of expansion. That was also, that was post-war, in the 1950s and 60s. They've done well by, the immigration and Canadian story as well. My father, so my grandfather's son, my dad, his experience was in, started off in manufacturing. So he designed travel trailers and mobile homes for Triple Canada, and then for Granger Housing. So and then he also did a stint at a steel detailing shop. So he was always drafting and designing. So I kind of grew up watching him in that. And then high interest rates happened in the 80s. Our family, we were living in a smaller town, Monteyne, Manitoba. We moved to the city, had to kind of start over because his business didn't make it. And he started over, and we started a little construction company. So I watched my dad go through all of that, the suffering of bankruptcy, and, the five of us living in a 2-bedroom apartment. It was, I didn't suffer by it because I was a kid, and, we had a lot of love in our family, but, it always, there's this undertone of the pain of that still kind of, there's this thread. But, my folks, in support of their family and not giving up, dug themselves out, started this little construction company, and then I started working with them. So I not formally trained, but I started in carpentry when I was 13 years old. And I did that all the way through junior high school, and then for 14 years after I graduated high school. So I worked with my dad in a construction company for almost 20 years. And through that time, we took on more and more design oriented projects. And I reached a point at which I was out of my element. I knew what was called for, but I just couldn't get there with the experience that I've had. And that's when, hard conversation with the folks just to determine where the company was going to go. And I opted to take a big risk and just go to university. U1, do my undergrad, do my master's. Like it was, it was 8 years, all said and done. So but it was all stemmed from, my interest and experience in construction, and my desire to sort of have the construction world and the design world merge. And so these roots go pretty far back. And then that's how we've kind of ended up where we are today. So Tom, who's the M in the Monteyne senior partner here, he was a prof at the university, and he hired me. I was in his design studio, and he hired me directly out of school in the last year that he was teaching. So he retired from teaching and chose to spend, his full-time effort on the firm. And then that's when, I joined the firm, and I've been here ever since, growing, the firm, and then bringing this architecture-led construction to what it is at the moment.
So there's two things that I'd like to mention. Number one, it's interesting, Chris, you said that, you came to a point where you were in construction, and you knew that you reached a point where you had to do something different, because it was, and I always say you're competently incompetent, right? To be smart enough to know that what you don't know.
That's right. Yep.
Right. You're competently incompetent, and then, and make the shift. Another thing I find really fascinating between your two stories, which I think is amazing. If you think both, coming from immigrant families, how many times do you say, well, we took a risk, right? Whether it's coming from El Salvador and another, another family taking a massive risk, going out, interesting, your great grandparents being in the war and us surviving, number one, surviving that in the camps, right? And then taking the risk to get to leave everything to come into this other country, right? And then be successful. And, it's really interesting when I look at that piece and to see the whole backstory, and to see the risks that you both taken, right? You went to university, Chris, and you didn't know. There was no guarantee that you're going to pull out the other side, right? James, it was your wife saying, what would you do, right? If you would not fail, and took the risk that I'm going to go into business. And yet now you're both successful. You really took the story of the history of your families and actually take it to the next generation. I think it's really fascinating. Very
yeah, that's I mean, James and I are not wired exactly the same way, but there's some of our hard wiring is very, shares a lot of common elements, and sort of the appreciation for the intergenerational continuity in our families is profoundly important to us both.
And, and learning what we learned from in the tech session, again, just from who you are as individuals, how you actually offset each other as well, and really naturally, instinctively actually overlap each other in different ways to get a greater outcome. So that piece as well. So that's really interesting. Brother from another mother.
That is right.
You could say that.
All right. So now, as you know, when we were in the session together, that geese fly with 71% more efficiency when flying in the V formation. So what do you think the secret is to getting a team flying in the V formation?
I can jump in there. I truly believe, going back to that course and really kind of reflecting upon that over the last few months, um, with we have instinctively been doing it, with the way that you had kind of shown and demonstrated. We still have some growth, and we still want to formalize it a little bit more. But it really starts with a clear vision. I think we have to, the clear vision of why we exist and why we're doing what we're doing. That has really been really important. And having a diverse team of people. Chris and I share values, but we exhibit and live out our values. We live out the values in a very similar way because they're similar values, but we come about in a very different approach. I'm super passionate and energetic and ready to go. Chris is super passionate but more subdued and calculated. You kind of need both, and I think going back to the geese analogy, we take the lead in different scenarios, and it really bodes well. So when you need financial analytical and you got to make a quick decision and be okay with it, I'm really good at that. When it takes more analytical, creative solutions and really speaking with confidence to a situation and not really doubting yourself in terms of like concepts, Chris is extremely competent on that, and that's just Chris and I. And then we have much greater depth of leadership, and Peter and Chris, Peter and Tom and Amy and Fletcher, who are all part of the ownership group, and we all bring our strengths to the team. And as we've developed systems, and I can only speak for the bobsled side, the construction side, we've also really have engaged very different sorts of people in the office. We have a bookkeeper who's an engineer by training from Peru. His immigration story is just recent, but really analytical, absolutely great uh, for the business in terms of analyzing the financials and understanding the financials. We have very creative types on even on the construction side, so it's very different, and everyone leads in their unique areas. Even though they're not owners, we give them opportunities to lead, similar to your geese 71% flying that formation, but it isn't one goose that's just constantly in the lead. Knowing and understanding to have let other people lead has really been important. So yeah, that's how we're kind of living it out, by different personalities and characteristics, seeing the value of that, and then letting people take ownership in their roles.
Yeah, I love that you're saying is like just empowering people to be that lead goose, right? So when it comes to this part of the project, or when it comes to this client, or when it comes to, right, empowering people, they don't have to be an owner, right? But they can be that have the empowerment to be able to take the lead. And while you're back in the formation doing other things, right, you keep flipping out. So I love what you say there. Chris, did you want to add to that at all about the flying the V formation?
Uh, James spoke to it very well. The only two things I would not even add, just supplement or reinforce. One of the secrets to flying in the V formation is just to acknowledge that we're all geese. Uh, hawks and eagles tend to not work in the same way, and um, sort of call it lone wolf syndrome, or it happens in entrepreneurship a lot, which is very ironic. So you get individuals that have strong sense of purpose, have a singular idea, are self-motivated, have all of those sort of core strengths, but then to not have that corresponding ability to work in teams and work together, it's a constant, I think, battle in any kind of small business, or sort of making something out of nothing. So the first step is just to sort of acknowledge in whatever way we have to, as individuals, that we are geese on some level, and then you will intrinsically accept that you are flying in formation with others in a team. The other is the idea that there are leaders and then there are followers is I have always chafed against that. A good friend of mine, very more wise person than me, said that you show leadership in how you follow. You demonstrate leadership by showing how to rightly follow. And you will find maybe that sometimes your figurehead or your position so demands a kind of leadership, but in a daily practice, you're constantly sort of delegating that leadership, and simultaneously receiving it, and even demonstrating to others how to follow somebody else. So it's not static. There's this constant sort of churning through, within, at least with how we work, and we're not fully formed. Like it's still sort of taking shape, but that's an ethic that we're focally aware of and trying to reinforce.
Can I steal your line? You show leadership and how you follow. Can I steal that?
It's not mine. It's a good friend. His name's David Whitcomb, and it may not even be his idea, but he's smart enough to sort of to focus in on it. But it's a really important principle, I think.
I agree. And when the reason that I gravitated towards that is when I work with an organization, my number one goal when we start the project is I want the leader to lead from behind.
Hmm.
And this is sort of it's saying the same thing in a different way. I've never heard a phrase that way.
Hmm.
So I love that. That is sage advice right there.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing going to that is when it comes to business, one of the things I constantly say to Chris is if the business needs us, like absolutely needs us, i.e., you're the leader, you're always the lead goose, you're always the man, the person in charge, you're the one, your ego's the greatest thing, and no, like the business cannot succeed without you. You don't have a business, you just have the world's crappiest job. It's just like you got to worry about the payroll. You got to worry about versus when you let other people lead and take charge and do this stuff. You realize that you're leading a team. You are ultimately, yes, you're in the lead and you're in charge, but you're constantly letting people go in front. You lead it for a bit, ask them the question, then they come in and go, okay, I got it from here. And that is just such a joy, why I wanted to get into business, to see that, to be a part of that, and seeing a team um, grow into that is honestly, one of the greatest joys I have as a in my business world. That is why I'm in business. I love buildings, I love architecture, but that actually isn't why I'm in business. It's because of the people
Mm-hmm.
and seeing them do something that they love to do.
Yeah, so the whys about how to lead people and develop people, we just happen to build buildings in order to do it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm.
Got it. All right. So let's get into this. So now, between Bobsled on Monteyne, what are you doing to better the pond? What is your organizations doing to make the world a better place?
Oh, I'll let Chris lead this one. I think he alluded to it earlier in regards to his whole spiel about architecture. So,
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, we've kind of covered it, but I suppose we could just revisit it with a
recap it.
with a more focused sort of response to the question. Uh, Healthy spaces and healthy environments are sort of in our mind key to flourishing. Um, we spend so much time in the built environment that as lovely as it is to get out into nature, and we have our share of like cabin projects and even outdoor um, nonprofit organizations that sort of have an emphasis in the natural world. So we tend to focus, to some of our efforts towards those things, but at its core, we are still urbanists, and having healthy cities uh, is kind of key to sort of human flourishing, and that you know extends into sort of a multitude of directions, be it a well-designed space that you're at a mental ease to dwell within, be that a recreational work entertainment. um, we sort of have a sort of core areas that we focus on. I mean, we don't do healthcare, things like that, but in the areas that we do focus on, that is a priority. Energy use, having so we have a number of us are passive house certified. Actually, James on the construction side is passive house certified, which is a reasonably arduous process to enable to execute our buildings to a standard where they have a very low energy use in the life of the building. Yet they have a high air exchange and high quality of indoor air. So it isn't good enough to just sort of seal up a building and say, well, the building is energy efficient while the people inside of it are suffering. Those two things have to go hand in hand, or you failed on both fronts.
Right.
I'm going to
Yeah.
interject there. So that was very, very inspirational, and this is why we work well together. So Chris is very, very good at communication, the vision, and the construction side is the outliving. Okay, boots to the ground. How are we going to get done? So those were to now demonstrate how we're living out those ethics. Um, I'll first of all the passive house, because that's what he ended with. We're actually building two currently in Winnipeg, which will be number two, number three passive house certified in all of Manitoba. So it's very few organizations do that, and I believe the first people that did it themselves and took quite a bit of time versus us and what we're doing and how we're kind of putting it together as a team. So we really live out that ethic, and we've, like alluded to, we have trained a number of staff in passive house certifications and passive house standards and methods. We are also looking at doing Manitoba's first passive house apartment block, which is in our design side, and we're looking at getting it to a place where budget works and we can build that. So that's going along with the energy use. In terms of building beautiful spaces, if anybody checks out our websites, Monteyne Architecture and Bobsled Construction, you'll see all the different types of buildings, a lot of urban dwellings, a lot of old buildings that are added onto or completely upgraded without tearing down the infrastructure. Or if it really needs to be taken down, we consider salvaging materials. So that's that ethic. And the last one is, not only do we believe in it, but we've put our money where our mouth is. So just this year, we finished our first larger development as an organization on the Monteyne bobsled side. It's actually right beside our office. So not only not only did we believe in what we do, we believed in it so much that we did it right beside our office, and it's a 5-story multi family apartment block, and there's 28 units there for families, affordable housing, by the way. So it's not like they're, it's really responding to the needs of Winnipeggers and the needs of affordable housing. So not only they're affordable, but they are architecturally designed, and they were essentially, they were gobbled up right away just because the stock and the design was so well attuned to the market and to what we do. And that was delivered by us as a first of all developer, architect, and builder, and now owner. We have Chris and the other business partner Tom are taking essentially a derelict building that was a crack house in Chris's neighborhood. Chris is less than 7 houses away from this old crack house that was abandoned, sit there for years and years and years, boarded up. And the vision between Tom and Chris saw not only this abandoned, weird, awkward house, they said we can do something with it. And now we're in the midst of developing that right now. We are probably 10 months away from turning that over and having 12 units and putting families in there where less than a decade ago it was home to drugs and not people in their best in terms of life, and we're going to change it around and bring families into this neighborhood that is right close by. So we are living out how we are bettering the pond every day, not just having a cool vision statement, but actually living it out.
That is so interesting. And I mean, a couple of things that both of you said was, Chris getting into talking about like healthy spaces, healthy environment. I love the line, like, mental ease to dwell within. I think that is a very powerful statement. So I think, because it's it's about, you're thinking about mental health and physical health and air quality and reduction in energy. But what really gets me, and maybe this is an unconscious thing, but if I look back at the backstories of your family of coming to Canada and taking a risk, and I'm sure there's probably other people from other countries coming into Winnipeg, and now you're going to take an old decrepit building and give them a home, or have a place so they can have a home. And I think it's just kind of an interesting connection there. I'm not sure if that's intentional or not, but it sure seems to weave rather nicely.
Yeah, sometimes you don't, you don't really fully understand what you've done until you have a moment to look back at it. But but the themes certainly do repeat.
Yeah, I guess that's fantastic. All right, one more question for you, and we'll wrap this up. Actually, two, but so just quickly, Chris, what's one thing that you've learned along your journey that you would share with an entrepreneur starting a business today?
Be really self-critical with what your skills and abilities are, and where you have gaps, get help. Don't waste your time trying to do everything yourself. I suspect that there are probably some people that have been able to work in that mode. And it's I don't want to be unequivocal. Everybody works differently, but from my experience, I would highly recommend if you have gaps in your knowledge and your experience and your skill set, there's a time to supplement your own knowledge and understanding, and then there's a time to lean on others to get that help and that understanding. So it sort of it goes back to your sort of analogy, just the flying in formation and us being geese and not lone wolves. So in that sense, I would strongly recommend either hiring a consultant or bringing on a partner, or joining an organization where you can sort of cross-pollinate and sort of get access to sort of those missing pieces. The business environment that we are working within currently, it's very complex. There's a lot of tax implications. There's a lot of regulatory hurdles that you have to get through. There are a lot of standards in business practices that are very hyper specific to whichever sector you find yourself in. And the amalgam of all of those things while running, managing staff and actually like dealing with branding and filing your taxes and just the millions of little things. At some point there will be not enough of you left to actually be able to run the business. So the lesson I've learned at some points the hard way, and currently the benefactor of, is growing the team to be able to supplement those weaknesses where one is weak, another is strong. So yeah.
James, what's one piece of advice you'd give an entrepreneur starting a business today?
Don't do it. No. There's some truth to that. Not gonna sit here and deny it. But it's you have to have deep conviction to do what you're doing. Because so the advice I would give is persevere, stick with it. Because the reality is success doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey, it's a path, and it really is, just doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. And anybody who tells you that it does is a liar. And it takes a lot of work. And it also, the other piece is it's got to be greater than money. Because when things aren't working and the money isn't flowing and the money isn't there, you have to know why you're there. If your greatest why is I want to make a bunch of money, don't do it.
Right.
It has to be about bettering the pond. How are you bettering the pond? Because when you are in the tough moments and those moments where those negative thoughts come in and you doubt and things aren't going right, you got to have strong convictions. You got to believe that it's going to be there. And if you can do that, and I agree with Chris with his advice, surround yourself with a good team. You have those two things, there's a high probability that success will come your way.
I'm a successful entrepreneur who hasn't had a sleepless night about making payroll.
Hey man, I love that. Me too. Mine's been all easy street, man. All easy, all good.
20-year overnight success.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. Okay, I have one last question for you, and then we'll wrap up. So James, let's come back to you. If you were standing on a mountain and the whole world was intently listening to you, what would you say?
That's a very tough question.
I'm chucking you out to the wolves right now. See,
That's a very tough question.
Chris gets the insight now from you, so
Well, it probably wouldn't be about business.
what would it be?
It would be about faith. Yeah, it
So
would
what would you tell them?
be that. Oh boy, this is getting real. I would just say that there's hope. There's hope in Jesus.
Okay,
Yeah, that's what I would say.
open Jesus. Okay.
Yeah.
Chris, you're standing on top of a mountain. The whole world is intently listening to you. What do you say?
It not dissimilar to James. The with common purpose is ultimately a far more potent force than an individual's vision. So to listening, we're in a day and age where there's a lot of polarization. So this might just be more situational, but I think the moment kind of demands it, is that everyone slow down and listen, a little less talking, a little more listening, and a lot more grace.
I love it. Fantastic. Thank you, gentlemen. So, James, Chris, I really want to thank you for your time. I know you got a lot going on, and I really appreciate the fact that you did take the time to be on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for everything doing, to better the pond. And one of the things that I just really love about this conversation is just really weaving in that whole backstory of your ancestry and whatnot, and how it's really played out today, and how it really, what I get from this conversation is that how you really deeply, deeply care about people. And whether it's the people you work with, whether you people work for, whether it's families that you'd never met that are actually getting housing, you really deeply care. You just happen to go into the architecture and construction business to make it happen. Right, and I think that becomes the one behind it all, and everything just kind of really weaved together, and I think that is just, it's really moving, and I think that is really what this is all about, and I can really see that as how you better the pond. Because of you actually do make a world a better place.
Thank you.
Thanks so much,
appreciate. We also likewise want to appreciate having you do this. It's it's a big step of faith for you to do as well, to continue to better the pond in your way. And I'm certain we'll continue to talk. There's obviously business to business that we need to do in the future, as I discussed in our tech group. We do definitely we see what you're doing out there, and you are seen and heard, and you are making a difference, and definitely have made a difference in our business and in us as well. So we appreciate that.
Thank you so much. So Chris and James, if people want to go find you, where do they go?
The easiest place is to our website. So Monteyne Architecture Works. And then Bobsled Construction. You can actually access the same website by either path. So there's actually even in the web design, it was a bit of a design exercise. There's a toggle switch that you can toggle between on the website to sort of focus on the Monteyne side of the business, or the Bobsled side of the business. I think that's the best way to find us.
Perfect. And are either one of you active on social media at all?
We are not. It is one of our gaps that we have identified over the last couple of years. I tried to join Instagram, and it actually said I was too old. So I have to find somebody younger. I have to find somebody younger that will know what to do with that tool. It said, "We want to keep this cool. You're outside the demographics we're interested in." So
That's the demographic of cool. Well, just so you know, I don't do Instagram either, so I was not shunned, but that's not my thing. So fair enough. All right. Well, so we'll put that in your website in the show notes so people can go there and they can contact you there
Yes, yeah.
and see about everything that you're doing. So fantastic. All right. There you have it, folks. I had a great time here, with Chris Knight, Monteyne Architecture, James Melendez, Bobsled Construction. Thanks again for everything that you do. And this is Warren Barry, and I'm flocking off to take you beyond the pond to better the pond because we're better together. Chris, James, thank you ever so much.
Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you. Take care.